You're nothing but a servant." The words sliced through the air like a knife, sharp and cold, echoing in the extravagant dining room. Travis Kincaid, the billionaire CEO, laughed as he watched Riley Johnson, the black maid, stand silently at his table. The expensive chandeliers above flickered slightly, casting long shadows on the polished marble floors, while the guests at the table chuckled, oblivious to the tension in the room. Riley's heart didn't race. She'd heard all before. But tonight was different. Tonight, she wasn't going to stay silent. She had nothing left to lose. Riley had spent years working at this restaurant, serving the rich and powerful who treated her like she was invisible. They never saw her as more than just a woman in a black uniform. Yet, in this moment, standing before Travis Kincaid, she knew she had the power to change everything. Travis, arrogant in his $5,000 suit, leaned back, his fingers tapping against his wine glass. "I don't need someone like you telling me how to run my business. You wouldn't even understand half of what I'm talking about." The other guests smirked, and Riley's grip tightened on the tray in her hands. This wasn't the first time she had been belittled, but it felt different now. Maybe it was the way he spoke to her like she wasn't even a person, like she didn't matter. Maybe it was the way he dismissed her without a second thought. As the laughter echoed in the room, something inside Riley snapped. She wasn't just any maid, and this wasn't just another night of serving rich people who thought they could treat her however they pleased. She had a mission. She had a purpose. Riley's thoughts flashed to Travis's daughter, lying in a hospital room, her life hanging by a thread due to a rare, life-threatening disease. Riley had overheard the conversation earlier that night. Travis was desperate, but pride kept him from asking for help. He had the money, but he didn't know where to turn. Riley had seen it, heard it all, and she knew exactly what needed to be done. In a sudden moment of clarity, she moved. Swiftly and without hesitation, she reached for the funds that could change everything, the money in Travis's business account. It wasn't about stealing. It was about saving. She had no idea what would happen next. But in that split second, she knew it was her only chance to help. Riley's heart pounded, but she didn't let fear take over. She took the money, left the restaurant, and raced toward the hospital, praying she wasn't too late. As Travis finished his meal, completely unaware of what had just transpired, the room was filled with a sense of satisfaction that only someone like him could understand. But Riley had already done something he never could have imagined. She was no longer just a maid. She had become a hero in her own right. And as the minutes passed, Travis's world, along with his cold, calculating smile, was about to come crashing down. The rain had finally stopped, but the air was thick with the kind of tension that never quite dissipates. Riley Johnson's hands trembled as she stood outside the emergency room, staring at the large glass doors that separated her from a life she had only ever dreamed of. She had never been this close to Travis Kincaid's world, his money, his power. But tonight, it wasn't about him. It was about saving his daughter. Riley's mind raced. The money she'd taken would be enough to pay for the rare treatments the hospital needed to keep his daughter alive. But even as she stood there, holding the weight of a decision that could change everything, doubt crept in. What if Travis found out? What if he came after her? A part of her wanted to run, to turn around and forget this night ever happened. But that part of her was small. The bigger part knew that the girl inside that hospital room needed her. And Riley wasn't going to let anything stop her now. Inside the sterile, fluorescent-lit corridors of the hospital, the world felt colder, quieter. Riley walked past nurses, doctors, and families, each person unaware of the quiet revolution unfolding in their midst. She didn't belong here, not in the world of wealth and privilege. She was just a maid, the kind of person they only noticed when they needed something, when they needed their glass refilled or their food served. She had been invisible her whole life, but now, in this moment, she had power. Riley stopped outside the ICU, her breath catching in her throat as she peeked through the small window on the door. Inside, Travis Kincaid sat by his daughter's bedside, his face etched with the exhaustion of a man who had run out of options. His hands were pressed together, his gaze focused on the monitors beeping softly beside her. His daughter, barely 16, looked pale and fragile. Riley felt a pang of sympathy. She had heard the whispers, the rumors about the billionaire CEO, how he'd built his empire with an iron fist, how his cold demeanor kept everyone at arm's length. But now, sitting there in the sterile light of the ICU, Riley saw something different. She saw a father desperate to save his child. As she stood there, watching him, Riley felt the weight of her actions. She had taken the money, yes, but it was for the right reason. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving anything. It was about doing what had to be done. For once in her life, she had made a choice that mattered. Riley stepped back, her mind still spinning. But as she turned to leave, she heard a voice behind her. You took the money." Travis's voice was low, shaky. She froze. The moment had arrived. The decision she had made to act, to save his daughter, was now hanging in the balance. What would he do? Would he let her go? Or would he retaliate, coming down on her with everything he had? She didn't know what to expect, but she did know one thing for certain. She couldn't turn back now. Riley took a deep breath and turned around slowly, meeting his eyes for the first time. Travis Kincaid, the man who had belittled her, who had treated her like she was nothing, was standing there, a mixture of confusion and something else on his face. His gaze flickered to the hospital room, then back to Riley. "Why?" he asked. Riley stood tall, her heart beating in her chest, but she didn't flinch. "Because your daughter needed saving," she said, her voice steady, unwavering. Travis stared at her, speechless for a moment, and then, to Riley's surprise, he took a step toward her. "You did what I couldn't do," he whispered. You saved her." The words hung in the air. A moment of unexpected vulnerability in a world built on walls. Riley didn't know what would happen next, but she knew this. For the first time in her life, she had earned her place in this world, not as a maid, but as a hero. The tension in the air was thick, but for the first time in what felt like forever, Riley felt a glimmer of hope. Travis Kincaid had just spoken words she never expected to hear. "You saved her." His voice was barely above a whisper, a far cry from the arrogant man who had mocked her just hours before. Riley stood still, processing the weight of what had just transpired. She had expected anger, punishment, maybe even a call to the authorities, but this was something else. Travis Kincaid, a billionaire with the world at his feet, was looking at her with something approaching gratitude. The room was quiet, the soft hum of machines in the background, the only sound that filled the space. His daughter, unconscious but stable, lay in the bed behind him. Riley's heart swelled with relief as she thought about the part she had played in saving this child's life. "I don't know what to say," Travis continued, his voice shaky. I've spent my entire life building an empire, controlling everything, and I couldn't even protect my own daughter." His gaze shifted to the hospital bed, the emotion in his eyes raw and unguarded. For a moment, Riley saw a different side of him, the side he kept hidden behind his wealth and power, the side of a father who was just as vulnerable as anyone else. "I never thought I'd be in a position to thank someone like you," he added. Riley looked at him, searching his face for any sign of mockery, any trace of the man who had belittled her just hours before. But there was none. There was only a man who had been humbled by the very person he had once dismissed. "You don't have to thank me," Riley replied quietly. "I did what anyone would have done." The words felt foreign in her mouth, as if she were finally speaking her truth for the first time. She had spent so long being invisible, always in the background, always overlooked. But now, standing in front of this man, she realized she wasn't just a maid anymore. She was a person who had made a difference. Travis seemed to read her thoughts, and for the first time, his expression softened. "What you did, it means more than I could ever repay." Riley shook her head. "You don't owe me anything." But deep down, she knew this was a turning point. For the first time, she wasn't just serving food or drinks to the rich. She had saved someone. She had changed a life, and that was worth more than anything she could have imagined. As Travis turned back to his daughter, Riley couldn't help but notice the way his posture had shifted, less rigid, more vulnerable. The walls he had spent years building around himself were beginning to crack. It was clear that the man who had walked into this hospital room was no longer the same. I don't know what the future holds, but I want to make things right, Travis said, his voice full of resolve. You deserve more than just a thank you. Riley was taken aback by the sincerity in his words. She had never expected this, never thought that the man who had so callously dismissed her would ever acknowledge her humanity. I've spent too much of my life making money, building my empire. But in that process, I've lost sight of what really matters. Family, kindness, the people who truly make a difference. Riley nodded, feeling a quiet strength in his words. What can I do to repay you? He asked, his eyes searching hers. Riley hesitated for a moment. She could ask for anything, money, a job, even a favor that could change her life forever. But as she looked at Travis, she realized that this moment wasn't about money or power. It was about something more meaningful. Take care of your daughter, she said, her voice steady. That's all I need. Travis stared at her, clearly moved by her response. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. And then, with a deep sigh, Travis nodded. I will. As Riley turned to leave the room, she couldn't help but feel a sense of peace wash over her. She had done something she never thought possible. She had changed her life, and perhaps even his. The days following Riley's decision were a blur. The weight of what she had done lingered in the back of her mind, but the hospital room had become her reality. She had made the choice to save a life, to stand up when she was told she was nothing, and it felt like everything had shifted. Travis Kincaid kept his word. He didn't just show gratitude, he did more. He made sure Riley's life would never be the same again. The next week, Riley's phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize. She hesitated before answering, her heart racing. Hello, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. This is Travis Kincaid, came the voice on the other end. Riley's breath caught in her throat. She had barely spoken to him since that night in the hospital, and now here he was calling her. I want to meet with you, he continued. In person. Can we arrange a time? Riley wasn't sure what to expect. Part of her thought he might have changed his mind, that maybe he was regretting his offer. But there was no going back now. Yes, of course, she replied. The meeting was set for the following day, at a cafe not far from the hospital. Riley arrived early, her mind racing with possibilities. What did he want from her? Was this some sort of test? When Travis arrived, he was dressed casually in a jacket and jeans, looking much more approachable than he had in the sterile walls of the hospital. He gave her a small, sincere smile as he took a seat across from her. I've been thinking a lot about what happened, he began. Riley nodded, unsure of what to say. I can't pretend I understand everything, but you did something no one else would have. You saved my daughter's life. He paused, his eyes meeting hers. And because of that, I owe you. More than just money. I want to offer you something real, something that can change your life. Riley's heart skipped a beat. She had no idea what he was about to say, but the sincerity in his eyes made her listen. I want to offer you a job, Travis continued. I know that doesn't fix everything, but it's something, a real opportunity. You don't have to stay in the background anymore. You've earned more than that. Riley's breath caught in her throat. A job? From him? It felt surreal, but the more she thought about it, the more she realized it wasn't just a job that mattered. It was the recognition, the opportunity to prove herself in a world that had never given her a chance. What kind of job? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Something meaningful, Travis said, his tone firm. Something where you don't have to hide. Something where you can show everyone what you're capable of. You deserve that much. Riley sat back in her chair, the offer sinking in. This was everything she had worked for, everything she had dreamed about. And yet it felt different now. This wasn't about climbing a corporate ladder. This wasn't about getting ahead. This was about redemption, hers and his. I don't know what to say, Riley said, her voice thick with emotion. You don't have to say anything, Travis replied. I know I can never repay what you did, but I want to make sure you have a chance to live the life you deserve. For the first time in years, Riley felt like she was looking at her future, not through the lens of servitude, but through the lens of possibility. I'll take the job, she said finally, but on one condition. Travis raised an eyebrow, intrigued. What's that? He asked. That you let me do it on my own, Riley replied. No handouts, no charity, just a real chance to prove myself. Travis's smile widened, and for the first time, she saw the respect in his eyes. "You've got it," he said. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Riley found herself stepping into a new world, a world where she was seen, where she was valued, and where her voice mattered. It wasn't always easy, and there were moments when she doubted herself, but she kept pushing forward. And as time passed, Travis became more than just a boss. He became a man who saw her for who she truly was, someone with strength, courage, and the power to change the world around her. As the weeks went by, Riley settled in her new role, each day feeling like a fresh start. The office was different from the world she had known. Less cold marble and more warm wooden desks, less silence and more conversations. She no longer stood in the background, silently moving between tables, but sat at the head of meetings, her voice heard and respected. She was no longer just the maid. She was Riley Johnson, a woman with something to prove, and Travis Kincaid had given her the platform to do so. At first, it was hard to shake the feeling of being an outsider, a feeling that had followed her for years, but slowly, the doubt began to fade. She found her rhythm, and as she worked, she began to see herself in a new light. Her ideas were valued. Her opinions mattered. She was good at what she did, and she wasn't about to let anyone forget it. Travis, to her surprise, had become more than just a boss. He had become a mentor, a quiet force of support who guided her without taking away her autonomy. He never treated her as a charity case, and that meant everything. One afternoon, after a particularly successful project presentation, Travis called her into his office. "Riley, you've done something that most people wouldn't even try," he said, his voice steady but with a note of genuine admiration. Riley wasn't sure how to respond. She had gotten used to people dismissing her, underestimating her at best, or ignoring her at worst. But this was different. She looked at him, and for the first time, she saw him not as a powerful CEO, but as someone who respected her. "You've earned your place here," he continued, "and I want you to take on more. There's a project coming up that could make or break this company, and I want you to lead it." Riley's heart skipped a beat. Let a project? She had always dreamed of moments like this, but it felt surreal now that it was actually happening. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice betraying a mix of excitement and disbelief. Travis nodded, a slight smile tugging at his lips. "Absolutely. I've seen what you're capable of, Riley. This is your time." Those words, those simple words, held so much more meaning than just an opportunity at work. It was a turning point, a moment that defined not only her career, but also her personal journey. Riley had come so far from the woman who had quietly served food and drinks in the shadows. She was no longer invisible. She was in control of her own destiny. She couldn't help but think back to that night in the hospital room, to the moment when she had made the decision that would change everything. She had taken the risk, stepped into the unknown, and fought for what was right. And now, here she was, leading a project respected and valued. The feeling was almost overwhelming. Over the next few weeks, Riley threw herself into the project with everything she had. She stayed late at the office, worked through weekends, and kept pushing herself to prove that she was more than capable of handling the responsibility. There were moments of doubt, of course. There were times when she wondered if she was in over her head. But every time she felt the weight of uncertainty creeping in, she remembered who she was now. She remembered the woman who had taken control of her life, who had made the choice to save a life, and, in doing so, had changed her own. As the project moved closer to completion, Travis checked in with her regularly, offering advice, encouragement, and the occasional word of praise. It was clear that he had confidence in her, but Riley never stopped working. She knew this was her chance to show the world, and herself, what she was truly capable of. When the project was finally completed and the results came in, it was nothing short of a success. The company was set to make millions, and Riley was at the center of it all. Travis called her into his office again, this time with a different look in his eyes. "You did it," he said. "You proved yourself." Riley felt a wave of pride wash over her. She had done it. She had taken that leap of faith, and now she was standing at the pinnacle of success, not because of what others had done for her, but because of what she had done for herself. As the months passed, Riley's life continued to evolve in ways she never imagined. She had gone from being a maid to leading high-profile projects, earning the respect of those who had once looked down on her. But there was still something gnawing at her, a feeling she couldn't shake. Despite all the success, she hadn't fully reconciled with her past. The constant reminder of who she used to be and where she came from lingered in the back of her mind. No matter how much she achieved, there were days when the shadows of her former life crept in. But then, something unexpected happened. One afternoon, as she was reviewing some new proposals in her office, a familiar knock sounded on her door. She looked up to find Travis standing there, a slight smile on his face. He had always been a serious man, his presence commanding the room, but there was something softer about him now, something more human. "Riley," he began, stepping inside. "I've been thinking about everything you've done for this company, and for me." Riley raised an eyebrow, unsure where this conversation was headed. "You've shown more than just skill," he continued. "You've shown heart. You've proven that you're not just another employee here. You're someone who can change the course of this company." Riley was silent for a moment, processing his words. She had always known that Travis was a man of power, but hearing him speak with such genuine admiration was unexpected. "I've been thinking about how we can take this to the next level," Travis said. "You've earned more than just a job here, Riley. You've earned a future." Riley's pulse quickened. Was he offering her something more? Something bigger than the role she had now? "I want you to join the executive team," Travis said, his eyes locking with hers. "You've earned your place among us. I know you might not feel ready for this, but I believe in you. You're the future of this company, and I want you to have a real seat at the table." Riley couldn't believe what she was hearing. The weight of his words hit her all at once. She had come so far, from serving food to leading projects, and now she was being offered a seat on the executive team. It was the culmination of everything she had worked for. But as the realization set in, something else emerged: fear. Fear of being in over her head, fear of losing herself in this new role, fear that she might not belong. I don't know what to say," Riley said, her voice a mix of shock and uncertainty. "Say yes," Travis replied, his tone steady. "Say yes, because you've already proven that you have what it takes. The only thing standing between you and this is you." Riley stood there, frozen for a moment, the weight of the decision pressing down on her. Could she really do this? Could she take the next step into a world she had once thought was out of reach? But then she remembered where she had started, the woman who was invisible, the woman who had been underestimated at every turn. She had defied every expectation, every doubt, and now this was her chance to take it all to the next level. "Yes," she said finally, her voice steady, her eyes meeting Travis's. "I'll take the position." Travis's smile widened, a look of approval crossing his face. "I knew you would," he said. And in that moment, Riley realized something important. She wasn't just taking a seat at the table. She was creating a new one. As the days went by and she settled into her new role, Riley began to see herself in a new light. No longer just the woman behind the scenes, no longer invisible, but someone who was not only seen, but heard. She was shaping her own future and the future of the company. Every challenge that came her way, she faced it with the same determination that had carried her this far. She had gone from being the maid who served at the back of the room to the woman who now stood at the front, leading with purpose and confidence. And as she looked ahead, she knew one thing for sure. This was just the beginning. As Riley took her place at the executive table, everything around her felt different. The office, once a place of subtle discomfort, now felt like a place she had earned the right to be. The people she had once served now looked at her with respect, not as someone to be ordered around, but as someone to collaborate with. It was a subtle shift, but it was undeniable. Riley had always known she had the potential for more, but now, in the heart of the company, it was a reality. The first few days as part of the executive team were challenging. There were meetings to attend, decisions to make, and moments where she doubted herself. But with each challenge, she grew stronger. She began to trust her instincts and, more importantly, trust the people around her. Travis continued to guide her, but he had taken a step back, allowing Riley the space to find her own voice. And it was in that space that she began to flourish. One afternoon, as she sat in a board meeting, Riley found herself speaking up more than she ever had before. The room went silent as she presented a new strategy that could save the company millions. For a moment, she hesitated, unsure if anyone would take her seriously. But then she remembered who she was now. The woman who had fought for her place at the table. The woman who had been underestimated, who had saved a life and changed her own in the process. Her voice was steady as she spoke, and when she finished, the room erupted in applause. She had done it. She had proven that she was more than just a maid, more than just a background player. She was a leader. The success of that meeting was just the beginning. Over the next few months, Riley continued to prove herself, gaining the trust of her colleagues and making decisions that transformed the company. She became known not just for her intelligence, but for her ability to connect with people, to inspire them, to bring out the best in them. Her past, once something she felt she had to hide, was now a source of strength. It reminded her of how far she had come and how much she had overcome. As Riley sat in her office late one evening, looking out at the city skyline, she couldn't help but reflect on her journey. From serving in the shadows to standing at the helm of a multi-billion-dollar company, her life had changed in ways she had never thought possible. She thought about the day she had first met Travis, how he had belittled her, how she had made the choice to take a risk and save his daughter. She thought about the way he had looked at her when he realized what she had done, the respect that had slowly formed between them. Riley smiled to herself. She had proven not just to Travis, not just to her colleagues, but to herself that she was worthy of all this success. And now, as she looked toward the future, she knew that there was nothing she couldn't do. She wasn't just a survivor. She was a force to be reckoned with. As Riley stood at the head of the conference table, her eyes scanned the faces of the executives. Around her, she had come so far from the woman who had once quietly served at the back of a restaurant, afraid of being overlooked. Now, she was the one making decisions that would shape the future of the company. It wasn't just about the numbers anymore. It was about creating a culture, a legacy. The boardroom was filled with energy, the kind of energy that only comes when people are fully invested in what they're doing. Riley's presence was commanding, her confidence unwavering as she presented her ideas for the company's next big move. The strategy she proposed wasn't just bold, it was visionary. It was the kind of move that could either make or break the company. But Riley believed in it. She believed in herself. When she finished her presentation, the room was silent. The tension was palpable as the board members exchanged looks. It was a moment that would define her future here. Then, one by one, they spoke up, offering their support. They were buying into her vision. They believed in her. When a final vote was cast, Riley's proposal passed unanimously. A wave of pride washed over her as she realized that this was no longer just a victory for the company. It was a personal triumph. Riley had done it. She had proven herself. She had earned this seat at the table, and now she was steering the ship. That night, as Riley sat in her office, her mind replayed the journey that had brought her here. She thought back to the early days, to the doubts and fears that had plagued her. She remembered the nights when she wasn't sure if she could continue, when the weight of the world felt too heavy. But she had kept going, kept pushing forward. And now, she was standing at the pinnacle of success. Travis's words echoed in her mind. "You've earned your place." It was true. She had earned it, not just with her intelligence and hard work, but with her resilience. She had fought for this. She had fought for every opportunity, for every inch of progress. As Riley looked out the window, her gaze drifting across the city lights, she couldn't help but smile. She had made it. She had become the person she had always known she could be. And the best part? This was just the beginning. The future was hers to shape, and she was ready for whatever came next. The past was no longer a shadow hanging over her. It was a part of her story, but it didn't define her anymore. Riley Johnson had stepped into the world she once thought was out of reach, and now she was in control. She wasn't just a survivor. She was a leader. And this was her time. As the months passed, Riley's life began to take on a new rhythm. She had become a key player at the company, her ideas shaping the direction of the business. But it wasn't just the success that defined her now. It was the person she had become. She had learned to trust herself, to trust her instincts, and to stand tall in the face of adversity. Each day, Riley walked into the office with a sense of purpose. She was no longer the woman who had once been invisible. She was the woman who had fought for her place at the table, and now, that table had become her own. Travis had watched her grow, and with each passing day, he became more convinced that she was the future of the company. He no longer saw her as just an employee. He saw her as someone who could take the reins and lead the company to new heights. "You've come a long way, Riley," Travis said one afternoon as they sat in his office, reviewing the latest quarterly reports. "I can't think of anyone better suited to lead this company into the next phase." Riley looked at him, surprised by the weight of his words. "You're ready for this," Travis continued. "You've already proven yourself. You know the business, you know the people, and most importantly, you know what needs to be done." Riley felt a surge of pride, but with it, a sense of responsibility. She knew that the stakes were higher than ever before. It wasn't just about making money. It was about creating a legacy, a company that would stand the test of time. That evening, as Riley sat in her office, reflecting on everything that had brought her here, she couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude. The road had been long, and there had been times when she thought she wouldn't make it. But here she was, standing on the precipice of something, much bigger than herself, and she wasn't going to back down now. The next morning, Riley called the board together. It was time to make the announcement. As she stood before them, her heart raced. This was the moment she had been waiting for. She was going to take control of the company, to lead it into the future. "I'm proud of everything we've accomplished together," Riley began, her voice steady. "But I know we can do even more. I've spent the last few years learning, growing, and proving myself. And now, I'm ready to take on the challenge of leading this company." The room was silent for a moment, and then, one by one, the board members nodded in approval. They had seen her dedication, her drive, and her ability to get results. They knew she was the right person for the job. As Riley sat at her new desk, the weight of her decision settled in. This wasn't just a new chapter for her. It was a new chapter for the company. And with that, Riley knew that the journey was far from over. She was no longer just a survivor. She was a leader. And now, it was her time to make her mark on the world.